Hello and welcome to Politics Today, and in this programme today we'll be talking about the battle that is Brexit. And in this programme I'm joined by Mark Sutherland from Creative Hub Productions. Welcome to the programme, Mark.
Hi, Simon.
And also Peter McAvenny, regular guest on this programme in the House, research in the House of Lords, and also very active in UKIP. So gentlemen, welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Simon.
I'll start off with you, Mark. We're currently at a place where it seems that there is a tremendous battle, politically and spiritually, over Brexit. We have huge opposition within the Conservative Party, with Theresa May being under pressure to accept to be part of the customs union, and many of her leading MPs wanting a complete break from the European Union. And then to add into the mix, we've got George Soros, international banker, that has been financing something like £500 million to try and bring about or derail Brexit, as it were. So in terms of where we are, in terms of Brexit, where are we, Mark?
Well, I think we need to just remind ourselves that 17,410,752 people, with a majority of over 1 million, voted out. That's where we are. That was the referendum decision. So where we are now, as you quite rightly said, we are in my own opinion, the biggest spiritual battle that I can ever remember and feel part of that. So we are at this point where we suddenly see various people that we've always suspected are now coming out of the woodwork. And I'm very glad to see publicly that we are affirming the fact that Mr. George Soros is going, here's 400,000, here's 500,000. These are the other activities that we will then look into what this particular gentleman has been up to, say on the other side of the pond, in regard to giving Hillary Clinton a heck of a lot of money. So he has been part of manipulating governments, etc. So he's taking £18 billion out of a £25 billion that he has and given it to his open society. We are dealing with huge forces. So suddenly when people say to me, why are you going on about politics? Why are you interested in this? We are dealing with principalities and powers, as Ephesians 6 makes very plain. And in that, we'll then find ourselves in Parliament that quite a number of our MPs do not wish to actually put forward the democratic mandate that they were given in that referendum. That's laid down there. So suddenly in a week, we've seen Mr. George Soros come forward. We've seen suddenly a report that says that these various areas and regions of the UK will suffer if we leave the EU, etc. Everything is coming against us. But as Christians, which doesn't seem to be a popular word to say in this country at the moment, we believe in prayer. We believe in the spiritual battle that's going on. And we passionately know that from 1958, there was a decision to take us in to the common market that's become a political union, where you would join a supranational government with unelected people. So suddenly, Mr. Soros et al. Think it's perfectly within their rights to go and overturn countries and change things without any democratic sort of consultation whatsoever. So it's then not surprising that Mr. Orbán of Hungary says, I'm banning you. And what's rather interesting, and thank goodness for people like Douglas Murray who lay this out, who then said, then I think Slovakia, has then said, no, we're banning him as well. What's rather interesting about that is Mr. Orbán, we would then say, is right-wing, and I think in Slovakia we would say then it's a left-wing government. These people know what is going on. We only have to look at the Ukraine, etc. Now, before then, the next, tweets and everything that go to you, Simon, going, well, Mark Sutherland, conspiracy theorist, nutbag, where's the silver helmet? We have to go and do the research. And that verse says, my people are destroyed through lack of knowledge. We were taken into a system that we were not fully explained what was going on, and the history of that goes back to 1924.
And Peter, I want to bring you in this conversation. Is it right that the likes of George Soros is using his money to the amount of £500 million pounds in this country to ensure that Brexit doesn't happen. And isn't this fundamentally against democracy and the will of the people?
Well, it's interesting because George Soros came here to this country and now seems to be actively working against what the people want, what the government are trying to do. I'm very concerned that you can actually buy certain movements in politics in this country. I think that if you give money, that should all be above board. People should see that, and thank goodness for the Daily Telegraph and actually producing this story so we can see where some of the money's coming from. We've got a lot of criticism that the Brexit vote was influenced by Russian money, and yet no one has actually produced anything to say where that money came from, and no one has produced a paper trail. And yet, on the other side, you've got these other groups putting $500,000 in. This is from one person. There could be a lot more money coming in. So I think it's very dangerous when you're in a democratic society for someone who is very well off to be able to influence a decision. I think it should be everyone has the same right, whether you're rich or poor, you have the same influence in the ballot box. And there is a danger that someone who has deep pockets can put down the money and influence the decision.
And Peter, when it comes down to Brexit, and there's certainly a lot of opposition to Brexit because we're dealing with people who have a vested interest in this European project, who don't necessarily care about the direction that this international organisation is going in, nor the people that they represent. Isn't there a need for greater transparency in politics so that we know what's at stake and we know also what the government's position is in terms of Brexit?
Just quickly to lay out a bit of previous history. In 1992, Mr. George Soros, because of his actions in regard to betting against the pound and made £1 billion profit, some of my friends actually lost their house over that. And we actually lost 2.5 or 3.5 billion of assets from the Bank of England. So let's just lay that. It's not the first time that Mr. Soros has sort of been part of interfering financially, etc. What is exactly going on. People need. I actually think that there is no doubt about it. We will leave. There is no doubt about it that all the thousands of people that voted to do that, as more of this comes out, I think they're quite happy to think, well, hold on a minute, no, we're not having you interfering. Remember when Mr. Obama came over and said, I think if you vote to leave, you will go to the back of the queue. People's backs are going up more and more, I believe, on this issue. And as you know, politics is where we can engage, disagree or agree, without shedding blood and people getting their weapons out. That's the whole point of Parliament. But people feel extremely as if to say, right, we have given you a mandate, will you now please do what we say? And more, all, as you rightly said, all the vested interests are being exposed, Simon. They are coming out more and more and more. When we have a situation when Mr. Barnier is rumoured to say, you know, and other people like that, to say that we are going to teach the UK a lesson here. Now that says we're going to teach you a lesson because we do not want any other country to come along and actually say that we're going to leave as well. Now, there is a little rumour that maybe even someone like Nick Clegg is turning around and saying, well, this doesn't seem to be cricket. You don't start talking to countries and people like this in this particular way. So on the one hand, it may seem this is really tough. On the other hand, Simon, I'm extremely encouraged because I do believe that God is exposing all that and bringing what is happening in the dark into the light, which is a total and utter scriptural process. And that is what's going on. And we in this country, most of the time, we're fairly straight shooters, we need to find out. We're extremely patient, and then we get pushed over the edge, and we want to know the truth. And more, I would say, that is what we have to be praying for.
Absolutely. And Peter, I mean, there's a lot of discussions whether Britain would remain as part of the customs union within the European Union, and we've had the likes of the heads of the EU saying that Britain should be part of the customs union. But effectively, doesn't that mean that we'd still be in the European Union, but we'd have no power to have any influence over EU decisions? So can you explain to our viewers what the customs union is and why, or if we do, why do we need a full Brexit?
Well, there are two. First of all, you have the single market, which is, in effect, the EU is one country. There is no restrictions on movement of people, on movement of goods, movement of services, movement of finance. So that moves around freely, but it means as a country you cannot say, I don't want that coming in, or we've got a concern, let's discuss it. It just comes over your border. So the problem we have is when people traffickers get in through porous external borders, then there's no controls internally. So we need to leave the single market so we have control over our borders and decide what comes in and out. With the customs union, it is the trade tariffs you put on goods coming in and out. And whenever we are in that, we have no say of what tariffs, what trade we have with other countries. We're subject to what Brussels tell us. So, and the problem is it puts poor countries at a massive disadvantage. So, Simon, let's say you're selling apples from a poor country, 50p. Let's say Mark is all selling them for 50p, and I say, you're from a poor country, I'm going to put 100% tariff. So instead of 50p, your apples are £1. Mark sells them for £1, he makes a profit, you don't, because I've chosen to punish you because you're a poor country, which happens across the board. So, for instance, Germany make more money from coffee than the whole of Africa make. And yet African countries actually produce it, they grow it. Men and women, hundreds of thousands, I assume, involved in the coffee business of growing that. They want to make money. They want to make money to pay for their kids' education, to pay for society. And yet the EU say, actually, we're going to punish you and make sure that you cannot process it, which is where the money comes from. So they just sell the raw product, which is of very low value. It goes to somewhere like Germany. Germany process it, they make the money off the roast coffee. So we have an opportunity outside a customs union to actually make a fair trade system. Just because we leave doesn't mean it will happen. But I think as Christians, we can then hold our government to account and say, we want a system which treats poor countries properly and doesn't just reward the richer countries. Let's have a level playing field. Someone from a poor country has the right to trade themselves out of poverty instead of just giving them aid, which, as we've seen the last few days, can be just wasted and squanders.
Absolutely. That's a whole different topic and a whole different programme, I think, Peter. And going on to this issue of Mark, isn't the issue that we're actually confronting here is an issue of globalism and this globalist agenda that Britain was part of the European Union, and now thanks to the referendum we had in 2016, the British people voted to leave, and we've also seen under President Trump in the United States, the American people express their will that they don't want to be part of this globalist agenda. Isn't that the main problem? And what does Brexit and what does Donald Trump's administration mean for the globalists?
Well, I think it means that they don't like the situation at all. That potentially we could see that game is beginning to be over. I mean, the bottom line is that if you as a nation don't have control of your borders, don't have control of your laws, don't have control of your language, and don't have control of your culture, then we have to define ourselves and say, then we don't have a country. And I love Europe. I love all the different parts of the individual cultures of that, but I do not want to be ruled by a supranational government that I haven't even asked for. So going back to that question, yes, there is a huge pushback. No wonder that the pushback is coming back the other way. And we have to, Simon, we have to so engage in prayer over this issue. And sadly, to me, it only seems that there is a small number in many ways. That there are the problem is not in many ways outside the church. The problem is within the church. The church is trying to work out how it defines itself. So in other words, we then turn around and go, do we believe the Bible or do we don't, or do we not? And what we seem to have is a group of people that think that they are revisionists and that they can rewrite it. So then they want to be, for some reason, part of this organisation that is atheistic, humanistic, and all the rest. And to me, if we then look in the book of Revelations, no, I'm not a preacher, just saying that, or a theological expert, but if we pick up the Bible and read this, and we come across the Church of Laodicea, that is where we're at. It's not popular to say we want to be nice to everyone. No. And if you're neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. And we then have to look at the Church of Philadelphia. And this is to me is where we're at. I like all these nice bits of Jesus. Let's all be nice to everyone. We have huge issues going on. Doesn't mean that we're popular. And as we have often discussed, we're not in for the stakes. So going back to globalism, there is a pushback. What is wrong with turning around and saying, can't I control the borders of my own country? And as we go through the history of our joining the European Union and all the rest, we were never really consulted on these. As there's a small paragraph that Heath put in that manifesto at times, where we would just take us into the common market. There are so many things that have never been explained, and you and I, we then get shot at because we're deciding to look at the history and understand what is going on.
And Peter, we see that it was looking pretty bleak for the European Union until we really saw the French presidential elections, and with the French president, we see with Macron in particular this drive now for a federal states of Europe, and he's pushing ahead and pushing Europe full steam ahead with this. And by the early part of the next decade, we're going to see a European army being established with a central European command. He's also said he wants tax harmonisation across Europe. So realistically, why, when we have this discussion about Brexit and about Europe, why is it not already mentioned that Europe's ultimate position is to push for a United States of Europe against the will of the people, because the vast majority of Europeans don't want to be a part of a European superstate?
Well, because the European project will continue despite what the people want. It's part of a system, and it benefits certain people, and it doesn't really matter what the people think. We saw that with when the Lisbon Treaty was in Ireland. Ireland voted against it. Wrong result. We're going to tell you have to vote again. And the money that went into Ireland to make the Irish people align with what the EU wanted, which was, no, you have to sign up to this. So it will push forward. But actually, I thought that the EU would fail because of Brexit, and Brexit may cause a domino effect. Actually, I think it will fail because of the sheer arrogance of the leaders of the EU. Because you see, obviously you see in Hungary, you see the Czech Republic, are very angry at how Poland as well, been taken to court by the EU because they won't do everything they're told to do by their masters. And they said, we've had enough of this. But actually now you see within Europe itself, you see in Germany with the Alternative for Deutschland being now the main opposition. You see in Austria with the Freedom Party and the new alliance which has come together for the new government there. So you've got right in the, it's no longer in the outskirts, it's actually in the heart of Europe. People are saying, hold on, we're not happy with this. We want to be consulted. We want to put the brakes on. We want to know what our identity is as a nation, as opposed to a European identity being forced upon us. So I think the anger of the people on the periphery countries, on the Eastern Europe, but also right in the centre, will actually make the whole thing fall apart. And the sheer arrogance of the leaders of the EU, they'll just keep pushing ahead until either those countries break away or until they have riots in the street. So we need to pray that whatever happens is peaceful and those countries regain their sovereignty once again.
Yeah. And Mark, many who argue in defence of our membership of the European Union that we're living today in a kind of globalised village, and the whole concept and the idea of the nation state is ended, and that we need to be part of a bigger political union in order to compete with the United States, with Southeast Asia, and to actually have power and influence in the world. Why are you so concerned about the direction under the the visionaries of the European Union and the likes of President Macron are pushing for, and that's the United States of Europe. What is so dangerous about a United States of Europe?
To me, it's cultural Marxism. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. I don't apologise for this. We look at the Tower of Babel and Nimrod. We've been here before. We have a Bible there for a reason. Pick it up and start reading it. It's in there. Oh, no, that was just a nice little story. That's irrelevant now. We've moved on. It's cultural Marxism. And then we look at the history of that, the democide that went on through the 20th century, and governments exterminating people because you are then not plugging into this system. God forbid that would start to happen. But it's happening in different ways through censorship on Facebook and all the rest. That is what's going on. It is freedom of speech, but it's about the fact that as Christians, it is the kingdom of God. It is about the gospel. They don't want that. This has been in the planning for a very, very long time. So suddenly, conspiracy word comes in again. It's been in there is a full frontal attack, whether that's restricting finance, whether that's restricting freedom of speech, whether that's turning around and saying, yes, you can have your Christianity, but we need to framework it within the context of this political correctness. That is what is going on. And so many people are more worried about, whatever they're going to sing on the Sunday and who's doing the tea rota than actually waking up to world events. So when you say to me, why am I concerned about that? Is because you see people who are then in power who turn around and go, right, we can create a one world government system. Oh, you're a lunatic to say that, Mr. Sutherland. No. Look at what is going on around you. If we hand over the power to a number of limited people, that's what's going on. If Mr. Soros can move markets and other people like him and can actually then say, right, we want to bring that government down, this is wrong. And they are way outside government systems. It's elitism. We see the liberal elite that is based within the M25 who then think that they have a right to actually dictate to us in regard to the media, etc.
And, Peter, when we're looking at these issues, and these are very, very, very big issues, we're dealing with a lot of spiritual darkness, aren't we? Because fundamentally, this is against some of the freedoms that our grandparents fought for during those dark days during World War II to protect our freedom and to protect our liberty. And yet we're seeing our liberty being attacked today. And anyone who's really speaking out against this doesn't really have anywhere to turn and don't really able to have a voice. And isn't there a great danger, particularly on the continent of Europe, that people will be embracing the far right because no one's prepared to talk about this in the mainstream political parties?
It's a big danger. If you remove that centre-right ground, which is addressing these issues, then you do leave it to others. And the public say, well, who is speaking for me? I have concerns about this. It's like the whole immigration argument where Gordon Brown called the people bigots for even mentioning this. If you need to listen to people. The role of government is to listen to people and see how best to protect them, see how best to serve them, see how best for individuals to flourish in the country. And when people speak, when you hold up the hand and say, I don't want to listen to you, your views are no longer important to me, I know best, then it's a slippery slope. And absolutely, we will see groups that come up, we will see demonstrations on the street, we will see violence because the government refused to listen to the people. So absolutely, that's where we will go if they refuse to listen. But I think that the darkness on Europe the darkness here in Britain is just as bad, because we need a strong church. And as Mark said, there's a fear of offence is greater than a concern for truth. And when the fear is about anything you say may hurt someone else instead of what is truth. So last week we had a teacher who has been suspended and reported to the PREVENT programme for being an extremist. PREVENT, which was set up to address Islamic terrorism, you have a Christian teacher has been sent to PREVENT because she told a girl who said she was a transgender. They had the discussion. The teacher said, well, God does not necessarily agree with that, but he loves you. She was then reported to Prevent for Extremism. That's where we are. You're just no longer allowed to say truth. So it's not just that there's a problem in Europe, actually, it's here on our doorstep. And unless we have a strong church that speaks up and stands up for truth and will stand up for Christ, then actually when we get the power back from the EU back to here, we may not be in any better position unless we can make right decisions with that power that we've now got.
Mark, we're down to the last 2 minutes of the programme, so we'll keep this brief. Can you tell or maybe advise our viewers how we pray through this and how we need the courage of the Lord to stand up and proclaim the truth and not worry about the consequences?
That's quite a mandate, Simon. And
Absolutely.
I think the number one thing is seek God on all these matters, inform yourself and to pray, and to pray for those of us that are speaking out or are given incredible platforms like this, etc. And to engage, to find out what's happening in their locality, etc. And to engage on all of those issues. It's not going to be easy. We only have to look at the history of Magna Carta, go through what Elizabeth I, etc., what they've actually changed and stood for in fighting for religious freedom. We seem to be just throwing it out the window. So the number one thing, I think, be informed, but to really seek God individually and collectively with other people who are of like mind.
And very, very briefly, Peter, where do we go for the truth? We know the truth in God's word, but how do we apply that to politics today?
Well, wherever we are, we pray for God to use us. So certainly for me in politics, whenever I go into the House of Lords or City Hall each day, I just say, God, how do you want to use me? Today's a new day that you've made, and I want to know how you'll use me, what you want me to say. When we read the newspapers, pray for the stories we read and say, God, how can you use me in this situation? I think if we are a praying people, open to God and asking for him to use us, then great things can happen.
Excellent. Guys, I think, this is the issue of our day. This is certainly the issue that is at the front of our government's focus, Brexit. So thank you for your excellent contribution to the programme, and hopefully this has made it clearer some of the political and also spiritual battles we face. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
And I just want to thank you for watching today's Politics Today. We're talking about the battle that is Brexit, and that's both a spiritual and also a political battle. And this is something that we need to engage in, because essentially this is about our freedom and our religious liberty and our democracy. And all those are being threatened as the world moves closer into a globalist agenda. So let's keep alert, let's keep vigilant, let's keep praying, and let's get involved in politics. So thank you for watching Politics Today.